Hey everyone, it's Rushni and I am back with my third answer video in my Spina Bifida Awareness Month series. Now, if you have not seen any of the previous two videos where I covered what is Spina Bifida, the different levels of Spina Bifida, and the level that my son has, and then in the second video I talked about developmental questions, go ahead, check them out, and then come back to this video because I'm just going to pick up where I left off. I have been reading you guys' comments. Thank you so much for all the love, support, kind words, prayers, encouragement, questions, sincere concern that you guys are leaving in the comments. It is absolutely wonderful to read, and I am reading them even if I don't get to respond to all of them. So anyway, today we are going to touch on surgery related questions and then cause and prevention related questions and answers. So let's get started. My son is 16 months old and he has had 5 surgeries. The first 4 of those surgeries happened in the first 3 weeks of his life. The first surgery that my son had occurred on the day after he was born. And this is generally what happens with any child that has spina bifida. The first surgery that they have to do is to close their spine. And now his surgery was very complex, and I found out just about a month ago from his neurosurgeon that my son pretty much had one of the largest lesion openings that he had ever dealt with. Our healing time was very atypical. Many people that have spina bifida, they have that surgery, they have excess skin, it's nice and neat, it's skin covered, and they can leave the hospital in a week. We were actually in the hospital for 5 weeks, and we left the hospital with an open wound on my son's back that we had to dress and redress and take care of, and it took 4 months for us to get skin coverage. If I knew that everybody wasn't dressing open wounds going home, I probably would have lost the little bit of sanity that I had. Surgery number 2 is to address his hydrocephalus. Now, if you go back to video number 2, you will hear the discussion on his hydrocephalus. They have to go in and do a ventricular shunt surgery where they place the shunt into his brain, and it was done in the back of his head. It goes in, and it's kind of like a catheter or a tubing that is underneath his skin, runs behind his ear, and goes down into his abdomen, and the cerebral fluid, the excess cerebral fluid, drains into his abdomen. You really hope that they only have to have the one, which is their lesion closure, and you pray that they don't end up having hydrocephalus, but the majority of them do. And so most children leave the hospital with just those 2 surgeries. Unfortunately for us, my son's shunt failed very soon after, like a few days after his shunt placement surgery. And so they had to remove the shunt and externalize it, which was surgery number 3. Yeah. So basically they took out the apparatus that was in there, everything that was in there, and they externalized it, and the cerebral fluid was now draining externally into a bag to sit at my son's bedside for the 4 days that we had to wait to test brain fluid to make sure that there was no infections before we redid his shunt. I would not wish that on anyone. And then, of course, days later, when we found out, thank God, that there was no infections, the 4th surgery was to place a new shunt, and his new shunt is actually further forward. In December, we had a surgery scare, which was we thought his shunt was failing. They give you a list of things to look out for, and unfortunately, many of the things that you're looking out for are typical "my kid is sick" things. And we were in the operating room prep. My son was in his robe. The nurses took him and wheeled him like he was going off to surgery, and then the doctor came in and said, "No, I don't think we're going to do it. If you're willing to come back in a couple days, we're going to monitor him." I said, okay, because if you tell me you don't have to cut my son's head open, I'm all for it. And we are now almost a full year later, and he is perfectly fine with that previous shunt. Surgery number 5 for my son was he had a tendon release surgery on one of his legs. One of his feet was kind of turned, and they had him in an orthotic boot to keep it straight, but it never really went straight. It would always just go back turned. So they had him in serial cast. They put a cast on for a week, put in a different position, take it off, put a cast on for a week, turn a different position. So we had 4 or 5 of those. And on the last one, there was a minor surgery where they just nicked right in his ankle and put the cast on. And now, since May, my son's foot is straight. Now, with respect to other surgeries that children have, there are a bevy of things, you guys. I am not a medical professional, so I do not know the answer to all of them. But I did touch on tethered cord in the last video. So if you want to know about that, you should check that out. I know that there are lots of orthopedic surgeries depending on children's level of functioning. And I do not know what other surgeries my son may need in the future. Obviously, my prayer is that he doesn't need any, but it's kind of like a wait and see.